Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. His breath snagged, then stopped, and the glass rattled on the sink. I grabbed his shoulders and counted out loud. "Stay with me." My throat burned and my hands shook hard. I felt the floor tilt under my feet as the seconds stretched. I'm Mara, 31, and I was dialing with clumsy thumbs. "Ambulance now." My voice scraped the air. He stared through me like I was static. The operator kept asking for details and my chest kept climbing. "He's conscious but fading." I pressed 2 fingers to his neck. A pulse thumped, uneven and terrifying. "Don't fight me." His jaw locked and his eyes flashed. I tasted metal and knew the worst wasn't here yet. Sirens grew, then filled the doorway with boots and firm orders. They strapped a sensor on his finger and lifted a mask. He flinched and pushed the mask away. The medic steadied his arm and shot me a look that stung. "We need him." Calm. The medic's tone cut clean. "I'm here." I reached for his hand and he jerked back. "Don't touch me." Spit hit my wrist and I froze. The medic nodded once and reached for restraints. I stepped aside and stared at the wall I couldn't name. He bucked and swore and begged in the same breath. "Please don't let them take me." His voice cracked in shards. I said nothing because any word would break something worse. They rolled him out and the apartment collapsed into quiet. I wiped my face and found the phone on the tile. Call history blinked like an accusation. I understood that tonight was only the first cut. At the hospital doors he twisted and clawed at the belt. "Let me out or I'll jump." His throat tore on jump. A nurse paled and reached for a code button. I mouthed yes because no had already failed. They pulled him inside and asked for medication lists. I gave what I knew and swallowed what I didn't. A clipboard slid my way like a test I would fail. I signed anyway and prayed the ink meant safety. Hours folded and the psychiatrist never materialized. A tech offered water and an unreadable smile. "Observation only." The words landed like dull stones. Something in me snapped into planning mode. I texted a therapist whose number I had saved. "Urgent situation, safety question, please call." The typing dots appeared and vanished twice. I braced for the moment when help would feel like betrayal. They discharged him before dawn and handed me instructions. He walked past me without a glance and kept walking. Outside he paused and looked at our street like a stranger. I followed anyway because leaving him alone felt like a dare. He brushed past me and jammed the latch hard. I reached for the chain and felt it bite my finger. "Give me space." His breath hit my cheek like a warning. I stepped back because pushing then would light a fuse. He headed for the spare room and dragged something heavy. Wood scraped until the door stuck against the frame. "Open up." I knocked with my knuckles until they throbbed. A chair thudded into place and the doorknob rattled. "Promise you won't call anyone." The words came through tight. "I need help here." I kept my voice steady and low. "You're not listening." The chair shifted and the wall shivered. I felt the hallway shrink to a trap. I slid my phone from my pocket and typed 3 letters. The therapist's name filled the screen and my thumb hovered. "Put that thing away." His shadow moved under the door. I killed the screen fast and tasted fear. "Food on the floor." His demand landed with a dull weight. "You can eat with me." I crouched and waited for movement. "Leave it outside and walk away." The door clicked twice. I left nothing because feeding the barricade meant surrender. He rattled the handle again and laughed without humor. "Go to work and act normal." He scraped the chair louder. "I'm not leaving you alone like this." Heat climbed my neck. "Then you're the problem here." The house absorbed that verdict. I called his sister and kept it short. "He's locked in and paranoid." My voice came out thin. "I'm driving over." Her breath caught and went flat. I stared at the blocked door and believed we were late. He started pacing behind the panel like an animal tracking. Steps stopped near the hinges and stayed there too long. "I know what you're doing," whispered now and close. Silence followed that whisper like a blade. The knob turned slowly and stopped halfway. His eye filled the gap and flicked around the hall. "Show me your hands." He spoke fast and clipped. I raised them and held my breath for the next test. "Say the phrase." He waited for a password I didn't know. I don't have one, truth felt like gasoline on concrete. You're compromised, the chair slammed and the gap vanished. I leaned against the wall and counted exits. Keys scraped inside and metal clinked against metal. He was building something ridiculous and dangerous. Don't make me force it, I hated the shape of force. The screwdriver chatter answered with pure defiance. The door fi. Nally opened a crack and his arm shot out. He snatched my wrist and searched for marks. Where did they inject you? His grip tightened and shook. I twisted free and stepped back before he escalated. Walk to the kitchen and stay there, his tone flattened. I'm calling urgent care now, I held the phone higher. He lunged and smacked it from my hand. It skidded under the couch and disappeared like a lifeline. He stared at me and blinked too slow. You will not betray me today, spit gathered at the corner. Then help me help you, I kept space between us. He started laughing again, and the laugh never reached his eyes. A fist pounded the front door like a drum beat. Open up, his sister yelled, and the hallway jolted awake. He froze and tilted his head like he heard static. Don't you dare let her in, each word scraped the air. I cracked the front door and met a tight face. Step aside, she pushed in and marched down the hall. Don't crowd him, I grabbed her sleeve and she yanked free. We both knew we were out of time. She stopped 2 feet from the barricade and lifted her phone. I'm calling a crisis team now, her thumb hovered over send. He kicked the door and the frame groaned. Family doesn't do this, the sentence ended in a growl. I shoved a chair against the hall wall and braced. Backups, my arm blocked her without thinking. We waited for the next crash and planned nothing out loud. Breathing felt like an alarm I couldn't shut off. The door eased again and an arm flailed for the handle. Give me the code phrase or leave forever, his palm quivered. We want you safe, she softened her tone and didn't blink. The chair shifted inside and a hole opened. He stepped out with a duffel strap looped across his chest. No clinics, no pills, no cops, he ticked each word off. Then where will you go? I heard my voice and hated it. Somewhere they can't track me, he stared past us. He pushed between us and reached for the front lock. I blocked the path and felt his shoulder hit mine. Stop before this becomes a report, her phone hovered again. He froze and looked like he might bite. Stand down and I walk, he pointed at the floor like a map. Hand me your wallet first, I felt reckless and precise. He blinked hard and recalculated the room. I had finally named a leverage point. He dropped the strap and held out his palm. Trade me then and step out of the path. I leaned to the console and palmed the cash only. The card stayed hidden against my wrist like a secret. He counted the bills and smiled without warmth. This buys me an hour and freedom, his knuckles whitened. Then use the hour to get real help, her voice steadied. He shoved past and the door banged against the frame. We listened to footsteps fade and the building settle. My legs shook and then went quiet. We need a professional team here sooner than later. I reached under the couch and fished out the phone. The therapist's number waited like a loaded choice. I typed 3 words and deleted them fast. He was in motion and that clock had started. I knew the next impact would be louder. The intercom crackled and his voice burst through it. Buzz me in or I climb the fire escape, metal scraped somewhere outside. My thumb hovered over the button and sweat slid down my spine. I pressed talk and whispered for him to wait 1 minute. I dialed the crisis line again and gave our address. Imminent risk, I said because that switch finally flipped. Stay on the line and prioritize safety, the calm tone steadied me. Outside, footsteps scraped closer like a countdown. Knuckles hammered the door until the frame trembled. Open or I start breaking windows, breathless and erratic and near. I slid the chain off and cracked the entry 2 inches. Hands where I can see them, I blurted, heart pounding unevenly. He leaned into the gap and scanned my face with suspicion. You called them again, his jaw bounced and his eyes kept moving. We need trained people here, I kept the opening narrow. He smiled without warmth and pressed his shoulder harder. No doctors, new rule number 1, he ticked a finger in the air. New rule number 2, give me every card, he held out his palm. Rule number 3, no talking to family, the palm curled into a fist. I measured the hallway and pictured exits. I will not hand you access to our accounts, my voice held. His lips twitched like he heard a dare and not a boundary. He shoved the door wide and crowded the threshold. I planted my feet and gripped the edge for balance. He grabbed my elbow and squeezed until my fingers tingled. Choose me or the strangers, spit dotted his cheek. Choose safety or this ends tonight, I answered with effort. The lock clicked behind us and the room shrank. A siren bled into the block and then cut off. He flinched and released my arm but didn't step back. If they touch me, I'll bite, he bared teeth and hissed air. I raised both hands and slowed my breathing on purpose. Walk with me to the couch and sit, I used the even tone. He prowled instead, quick and twitchy and scanning corners. You bugged the place, he crouched and tapped the baseboard. Every tap sounded like a fuse. Boots thudded in the hall and a knock followed. Mobile team here, a woman's voice carried through the door. He froze and looked at me like I controlled the sun. Tell them you misdialed or we're done. I opened the door to the chain's limit and spoke carefully. Unstable behavior, threats, physical contact, I forced each word out. The clinician met my eyes and nodded once. We can evaluate voluntary first, she offered through the crack. He laughed and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Voluntary means trap, he flexed his fingers and rolled his neck. Nobody cages me today, his chest heaved against my forearm. I saw the moment he targeted the gap. He lunged and the chain snapped with a sharp pop. The clinician jumped back and raised her hands. The second responder moved forward with practiced calm. Space, he warned, but the warning barely slowed the storm. I slid between them and him and blocked with both arms. Do not touch me, his voice pitched higher and trembled. We can walk outside and talk, the clinician offered gently. Outside his ambush, he spit, eyes on the stairwell. He darted for the kitchen and yanked open a drawer. I stepped in front of it and shut it with my hip. Nothing sharp, the responder said, palms still up. My calves shook as I held the drawer shut. Back away or I swear I'll break something alive, he doubled down. The responder glanced at the clinician and made a tiny nod. We are transitioning to a higher level of intervention, calm again. I felt the decision land like a door slamming somewhere deep. Don't you dare authorize that, he kicked the cabinet and winced. One more chance to go willingly, she said, eyes on his face. He crouched and whispered to the floor like it answered. He stood and bolted for the bedroom instead. They followed at a measured pace and gave him room. Hands visible, the responder called steady and low. I lingered in the hallway and fought the urge to run. A cabinet door snapped open and something clattered across the rug. He emerged clutching a framed photo like a shield. Last time I trusted you, he shook the frame and glass dust sprinkled. Put that down and come sit near the door, the clinician stayed calm. He smashed the frame against his knee and stared at me. Pick me or paperwork, the photo fell in two jagged halves. I will not lie to save this version of us, my voice steadied. His pupils blew wide and the world narrowed to his breath. He took one step then another then stopped dead. The responder eased closer and kept his hands open. I am placing you under emergency transport for evaluation, he stated. Fight and we use restraints, walk and we don't, he let it hang. Silence spread like plastic wrap over the hallway. He looked at me and I saw the person I married flicker. A tear formed and he crushed it with the heel of his hand. Walk or carry, the responder repeated, patient but final. He exhaled once and gave up his wrists. They escorted him out while he muttered about tracking devices. He glanced back only once and his stare burned hot. The stairs swallowed their steps and the door swung shut. I stood alone with the shards and a ringing head. The clinician returned and handed me an incident number. Pack essentials and remove valuables tonight, she advised softly. Tomorrow we can discuss protective measures and options, professional and human. I nodded because words would shatter my teeth. After they left, I gathered the photo pieces into a towel. I noticed the empty corner where our safe once sat. He had moved it without me hearing it all. My stomach dropped as new math started running. I opened my banking app and froze at the alerts. Withdrawals stacked in minutes and the total bled fast. He had memorized numbers during calmer days and waited. I locked everything I could and kept going. The last alert stopped, then a new notification appeared. Unknown device signed in near the park he mentioned earlier. He was hunting for the next move and I felt it. I powered down the phone and pulled the router cord. My hand shook, then steadied, then shook again. I counted the steps to the bedroom and back. I filled a bag with documents and one change of clothes. I left the apartment and kept walking toward light. On the stairs, I called his sister with the update. Hospital now, involuntary hold likely, I forced out. I'll meet you there, but don't wait by the door, her breath hitched. I kept moving because standing still had started the fire. The ward buzzer popped and my last name echoed. A nurse pointed to a phone on the wall. He's asking for you, her eyes didn't blink. I lifted the receiver and braced for impact. I know you're nearby, breath scraped across the line. Walk in alone and I'll cooperate, plastic creaked under my grip. Only with staff present, I stared at the clock. He laughed once and the line went dead. Security escorted me to a tiny meeting room. A social worker slipped in with a clipboard tucked under arm. Short stay for evaluation, she said, voice even. Tell me where you feel unsafe first. Home is compromised, the words surprised me with their weight. Finances are bleeding and he's mobile, my throat tightened. She wrote fast and folded the page over. We can flag accounts with the hospital advocate. A crash burst from the hallway and a shout followed. I pushed to the doorway as two techs wrestled a gurney. He strained against soft straps and locked on me. Traitor, he spat the word like a promise. I stepped back and the social worker blocked my path. Let them handle the hold, her hand hovered near my elbow. Your job is decisions, not containment, she didn't move. I swallowed hard and kept still while he thrashed. Minutes later, a psychiatrist walked in with a tablet. 3 days for stabilization, he said without fanfare. Medication offered, not forced unless danger escalates, a quick glance. Call tomorrow and we can reassess together. Document threats and keep receipts, the advocate added quietly. Consider an emergency order if contact continues. She slid a packet toward me and tapped the first page. My fingers hesitated over the line for petitioner. My phone lit up with a banking alert. Another withdrawal hit from a kiosk across town. I showed the screen and the advocate nodded once. Freeze everything now or you'll chase air. I stepped into the hallway and dialed the bank. Report fraud and restrict every card, I told the rep. New numbers will be issued after verification, calm voice. The call ended and my hands kept shaking anyway. The nurse reappeared and asked if I wanted a supervised visit. I looked through the glass and saw him staring at the ceiling. His chest rose fast and his lips moved silently. I'll pass today, distance felt like armor. On my way out, my phone rang again and stopped. Unknown number, then the same number tried once more. Voicemail arrived and I listened with one foot on the curb. Pick me up or I start walking. I returned inside and flagged the desk. He's calling from a unit phone, the nurse confirmed briskly. We'll restrict his access to your contact, a quick note. Relief hit, then guilt chased after it. Outside, his sister waited near the curb with clenched jaw. Status, she kept her eyes on the automatic doors. 72 hours, maybe more if risk persists. Then we get our lives off the grid. We drove to the apartment without turning the radio on. In the lobby, a neighbor peered out and ducked back. I unlocked our place and paused at the threshold. The air felt disturbed, like someone had tested limits. In the bedroom, the closet rod sagged on one side. Boxes leaned open where he had rummaged earlier. I checked the nightstand and found an empty space. The old passport was gone along with a small drive. My sister-in-law scanned the room and called his case manager. Flag flight risk, she urged, voice clipped and efficient. We just lost travel documents from the apartment. The reply promised a note to the chart and security. I gathered paperwork and reached for my go bag. The strap fell heavier than it should have. A black dot winked from the lining near the seam. I squeezed it and felt a tiny battery hum. Tracker, I held it up and my mouth went dry. She backed up 2 steps and whispered a curse. Turn it off and ditch it far from here. I wrapped it in foil and pictured 7 worst outcomes. We loaded the trunk and I double-checked the locks. Downstairs, a cruiser rolled past and paused at the corner. The officer glanced at us and kept moving slowly. I wondered who had asked them to circle. Back upstairs, my phone vibrated with a new text. Unknown number again, message short and deliberate. I know where you park, followed by a selfie from a curb. The timestamp matched less than 5 minutes ago. I forwarded the screenshot to the advocate and to myself. Emergency order tonight, came the quick reply. Meet me at the courthouse annex before it closes. The clock tightened around my ribs. On the way out, my neighbor cracked her door open. You okay? Her eyes darted to my bag and back. Temporary situation, help is involved. I kept moving. She nodded once and slid the lock into place. At the annex, an officer guided me through metal detectors. A clerk handed over forms with boxes already highlighted. Describe incidents with dates and direct quotes. I wrote slowly because accuracy would become a shield. When I finished, the clerk stamped the top page hard. Judge reviews within the hour, she said without looking up. Stay close to this window for any questions. I stepped aside and checked my phone for breathing room. A final message waited without a number attached. Don't make me come home angry, the words pulsed. I stared until the screen dimmed and my hand ached. I turned it off and looked toward the courtroom doors. The clerk waved me forward and slid a stamped packet under glass. Temporary protection granted through next hearing. Her finger tapped the bold line. Serve immediately and keep this on you. The doors to chambers opened behind her. I clutched the order and felt the ground tilt again. An officer met me at the exit and checked the case number. We can serve him tonight at the facility. He adjusted his belt and nodded. Follow us in your car and wait outside. My pulse answered before my mouth did. I signed his clipboard and headed for the lot. At the hospital entrance, he appeared in a wheelchair between 2 staff. He spotted me and straightened like a wire. You're doing theater for strangers. His grin looked borrowed from someone cruel. The officer approached and unfolded the order like a blade. This prohibits contact and requires distance, the officer stated, steady voice. Violation results in arrest and additional charges. The words fell like weights. He stared at the seal and then at me for too long. Paper isn't stronger than blood, he murmured, eyes fixed and feral. The nurse wheeled him back and the doors swallowed them. The officer returned with a copy marked served. Document any messages or sightings immediately. He handed me a card. I tucked it beside the order and exhaled in short bursts. Outside, my screen lit with unknown numbers in rapid sequence. A group chat notification popped from a mutual friend. Why would you trap him in psych? The message read. Screenshots of my order followed with a shrill caption. I typed 3 lines and deleted each one halfway through. I forwarded the thread to the advocate and hit send. Do not respond and block them, she texted back. Smear campaigns are common during acute episodes, followed by a hotline link. Another ping, this time from our building manager. Your lock was tampered with this afternoon, his note read. Requesting permission to replace hardware tonight, he added quickly. I approved and asked for a receipt for the file. On the drive home, I kept scanning mirrors for shadows. A scooter followed for 6 intersections and then veered off. I took a longer route and pulled into a different garage. Paranoia or survival, I couldn't tell anymore. The therapist called while I waited for the installer. I consulted with the on-call psychiatrist, she began. Symptoms suggest a psychotic spectrum presentation with high agitation. Your choices now must stay boring and consistent. Boring means safe, I repeated with a dry mouth. Yes, predictable routines and strict boundaries, she said. Also consider a safety plan for sleep and arrival. Change patterns and keep allies informed about location. The locksmith finished and handed me new keys in a small envelope. Whoever worked the old deadbolt used a bump key, he observed. Replace the chain with a reinforced bar tomorrow morning. I thanked him and felt the door sit heavier in my hand. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from a blocked number. Look behind the couch, his voice whispered through static. I stared at the fabric and lifted the corner slowly. A second tracker blinked from a seam like a heartbeat. I sealed it in a tin and placed it on the balcony. I texted the officer a photo and location for evidence. Do not destroy it and stay inside tonight, his reply read. Patrol will pass by within the hour. Another message came through from a different contact. His aunt is driving to the hospital now, the text read. She wants to take him home when the hold ends. My stomach clenched at the timeline implied by that plan. I grabbed a notebook and started a visible log. Timestamps for every call and knock and engine noise. I wrote the second tracker find in clean block letters. Writing steadied my hands and sharpened my thinking. Close to midnight, the hospital extension flashed again. He is declining medication and refusing family visits, the nurse reported. We extended the hold due to escalating threats and delusions. Please avoid answering unknown calls for your safety tonight. I set the phone face down and leaned against the door. The hallway hummed with normal life and distant televisions. I practiced how to say no without explanation in one breath. The word felt heavier now, yet easier to lift. A car idled outside longer than traffic usually does. I peered through the peephole and saw nothing familiar. The engine cut off and footsteps climbed the stairs. They stopped 2 floors below and stayed like a test. At 3 a.m, a fresh alert hit my email. A password reset request for our shared streaming account. I denied it and removed every device on the list. A profile named Infinity pinged and then vanished. By sunrise, I had a bag by the door and shoes laid out. Not a plan for flight, a plan for choice. I messaged my boss 2 lines about emergency leave. They replied with support and a promise to cover. The officer called back just after 7 with an update. Order entered into the system and confirmed at the facility. Any approach will generate an immediate response now. Keep your ringer on and your doors secured. I nodded to the empty room because nodding helped me believe. I dialed a lawyer whose card the advocate sent overnight. Consult today at noon, her assistant confirmed, brisk and kind. Bring the order and your incident log. Before I left, I checked the balcony tin again. Condensation beaded along the lid like it was sweating. The tracker still pulsed a faint rhythm through metal. I slid the whole thing into a tote for delivery to evidence. On the sidewalk, a teenage kid watched me with interest. He glanced at my tote and then at my face. You got stock tech in there, he muttered with a shrug. Folks drop them on bikes under bumpers. Thanks for the tip, I answered while moving. He pointed toward the alley and disappeared with quick steps. I crouched by my car and checked behind the wheel wells. A small magnet with tape clung where road grit collects. I pried it loose with a key and held my breath. Battery antenna, another signal trying to map my life. I bagged it and called the officer with the plate location. Bring both devices to the precinct after your meeting. I made it to the lawyer's office with minutes to spare. She scanned the order and my notes without ceremony. File for a longer protective order and initiate separation, she advised. Today we draft and lock your finances for good. I signed where she pointed and let the pen press deep. The shapes of my name felt like decisions and doors. She slid copies into a folder and set her jaw. We serve him at discharge, then we serve him again. The lawyer slid a draft across the desk and tapped the signature line. File now and request exclusive use of the apartment. Her tone stayed even. I signed in 3 places and pressed harder on the last loop. We both knew the clock had teeth. My phone buzzed with a hospital extension before I stood. He attempted to walk off the unit during visiting hour, the nurse reported. Security redirected him without restraints. Agitation remains high. Calm words. Please avoid contact until the team updates the plan. Outside the elevator, his aunt blocked my path with sharp breath. You're escalating this with courts and cops, her hands trembled. He needs family, not paperwork, she clutched her purse like a lifeline. He needs safety, and this order keeps us alive. She took a step closer and lowered her voice. Drop the complaint and I'll take him home tonight. The hospital extended the hold, I answered without breaking eye contact. Her lips thinned and she walked away with her phone already dialing. The therapist texted while I waited at the curb. Relocate for a few nights and do not announce the address. Travel light and tell 2 people where you sleep. I read it twice and felt my chest settle into decision. I reached the apartment and scanned every corner for movement. The new deadbolt seated clean, the bar locked tight. I packed clothing, documents, and the evidence bag for police. Each item went in without hesitation because hesitation gets punished. A siren wailed nearby and cut suddenly. I peered through the peephole and caught a shadow at the stairhead. Knuckles rapped a rhythm that matched his old knock. My fingers tightened on the phone like it might shatter. Open the door for 2 minutes, his voice slid through the wood. I'm calm and I just want to talk. A pause followed. Your lies are causing legal harm and spiritual damage. I texted 911 the case number and waited for typing dots. You are violating a protective order, I spoke loud and clear. Leave the building or police will meet you here. Silence pooled outside the door and my stomach crawled. He exhaled once, long and theatrical, then tried the handle. The bar held but the frame groaned under the force. Let me bless the space and I'll disappear, he offered softly. Last chance for harmony, the knob scraped again. I braced both hands on the bar and kept breathing. Boots pounded the corridor and a radio squawked. Step back from the door and show your hands, firm command. A scuffle erupted and someone cursed in a strangled voice. Metal clicked and the hallway fell into controlled quiet. I opened to a narrow gap when they asked me to. 2 officers stood with notebooks and steady faces. He was on the landing with a duffel and a phone. Violation in progress, we're transporting for booking. They read the conditions again while he stared past me. You turned love into surveillance and punishment, his jaw shook. I held the order where he could see the seal up close. His eyes flashed, then went flat like a door slamming. Downstairs, they loaded him into the back without struggle. The younger officer asked if I had somewhere safe tonight. Yes, a hotel across town and then a friend's couch. Text us the addresses only if he shows up again. When they pulled away, I locked up and called the precinct. Submit the trackers as evidence now, the desk officer advised. Bring the bag and your written log from last night. I grabbed the tote and headed for the elevator without looking back. At the station, the property clerk photographed each device. Commercial grade, likely purchased online, he observed quietly. These often transmit in bursts to avoid detection. He sealed the labels and slid the bag through a slot. My lawyer called as I stepped onto the sidewalk again. The judge signed the separation filing and set a hearing. We will serve the divorce packet at arraignment tomorrow. Stay unavailable to his relatives until after court. I booked a room under a shortened version of my name. I paid in cash and asked for a top floor. I tested the lock 3 times and pulled the curtains tight. Sleep came shallow and jagged and still better than last week. Just after midnight, my phone lit with a new voicemail. Drop everything and we rebuild tomorrow, his voice urged. No more interference, no more doctors, only obedience and vows. I saved it and sent the audio to my lawyer and the officer. Warning hit with an email from the psychiatrist on duty. Discharge postponed due to arrest and acute instability. Court liaison will coordinate treatment recommendations for arraignment. I read it twice and felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. By 9, the therapist met me at a coffee stand near the station. Your boundaries held under pressure, she said, eyes steady. That is a skill and a choice you will repeat. I nodded because agreement kept me from shaking. A mutual friend approached with a cautious wave and a question. Is there anything I can do that doesn't involve choosing sides? Bring groceries to his sister and stop forwarding gossip. He swallowed hard and promised to do exactly that. Before court, the advocate handed me a slim folder. Victim services can install alarms and provide escort if requested. Also a day program for legal support and counseling. I signed for the appointment and added it to my log. We entered the courtroom and sat 2 rows apart. He shuffled in with a public defender and stared at the floor. The clerk read the case number and the order conditions aloud. He lifted his head and searched for me like a radar. The judge reviewed the paperwork and turned to my side. Do you intend to proceed with dissolution alongside the order? Yes, and I request exclusive use of the residence today. She nodded once and set a short date for hearing. They let him out through a side door for transport. He looked back once with an expression I recognized from years ago. For a second, I wanted to run after that look. I gripped the bench and let the second pass unanswered. In the hallway, the advocate squeezed my shoulder and released. Next steps are logistics and boring structure, she reminded. Change routines, schedule locks, file mail holds today. I exhaled and committed to dull choices that keep people breathing. On the street, my phone buzzed with a final update. Service of divorce completed at the courthouse. My lawyer's text blinked. Focus on safety and we'll handle the rest. I stood there with the news and felt the ground steady for now. The door chain scraped while the officer read my new order. Exclusive possession granted effective today. He folded the page once. We'll stand by while you clear anything you need. I nodded and unlocked because delaying always costs. Inside, the apartment felt booby-trapped by memory and caution. I checked closets and vents before touching a drawer. The officer hovered near the hallway like a human tripwire. We moved room by room and kept our breaths short. A padded envelope lay on the mat without a return address. I opened it with a key and slid out a phone. Screen lit on its own and broadcast our Wi-Fi name. The officer bagged it and asked if more were hidden. We found a pinhole lens inside a smoke detector casing. The body heat rose from my neck like a flare. He logged the find and called the detective on the case. Link this to the trackers and the bail violations, he said. My lock screen flashed with a new group chat invite. 3 contacts I barely knew waited inside the bubble. You can still walk this back, one wrote with urgency. I took a screenshot and blocked them as my pulse kicked. At noon, the liaison called with a tight update. Inpatient will discharge to a step-down program next week. Restrictions remain in force, staff briefed on your paperwork. I asked for doors between us at every juncture. The bank put me in a private room without asking. A manager pulled the old statements on a large display. Multiple kiosk withdrawals cluster around transit hubs, she observed. We froze the last shared account and issued separate credentials. As I left the branch, a man matched my pace. Message from him, he murmured without eye contact. He wants a meeting in a public park today. I stopped near the curb and lifted my phone slowly. No intermediaries allowed by court order, I said clearly. He shrugged and pointed at a waiting scooter by the curb. Tell him the answer is no and documented, I added. The scooter carried him into traffic while I dialed dispatch. Back home, the officer met me with a small grin. Detective traced those devices to an online vendor. Orders shipped to a locker under a self-assigned name. They scheduled a warrant for security footage from pickup. My attorney texted a stern two-line strategy shift. File for contempt due to contact attempts and tech abuse. Request immediate review of bail and enhanced conditions. I signed the draft electronically and felt anger sharpen. His sister called from a payphone with a cracked edge. He thinks you're staging a smear campaign, her voice shook. Tell the program he needs a different roommate, I answered. She whispered thanks and hung up like it hurt. A process server knocked and handed me another packet. Petition for short-term spousal support, the cover read. He claimed I had blockaded shared funds and assets. I forwarded everything to my lawyer with one word, contest. That evening, the detective sat at my kitchen table. He opened his notebook and drew a quick map. Device 1 under bumper, device 2 in couch seam. Phone likely preloaded for remote mic and GPS. Will this stick in court? I asked without preamble. It builds a pattern that judges pay attention to. We also pulled camera stills from the locker location. An image slid across the table and stopped my breath. He had worn a hoodie with an altered brim and scarf. The stance was unmistakable even without a full face. The detective circled the bag brand with a pen. Retailer records may tie purchase to his debit card. Before the detective left, he handed me a metal wedge. Prop this under the door every night, he instructed. Install a peephole cover and vary your exits. I slipped the wedge into place like a quiet contract. A coworker texted while I triple-checked the windows. Someone called pretending to be your husband's counselor. They asked for your shift schedule and extension. We flagged HR and set a code phrase for any calls. The next morning, a patrol car escorted me to storage. I opened a crate and found a taped envelope inside. Inside the envelope lay a list titled Daily Pattern. It marked grocery runs and therapy sessions by time. My hands went cold while the officer watched my face. We logged this and pushed the contempt hearing forward. He photographed the list and sealed it in evidence. Pattern equals vulnerability when someone wants domination. A voicemail landed from a number spoofing the hospital. Forgiveness is a moral duty, the voice insisted slowly. Withdraw your filings and we can start new vows. I saved it and asked the liaison to confirm spoofing. At lunch, the therapist met me in a lobby chair. I want one anchor statement for every ambush, she said. Choose a line that routes you back to safety. I picked one: I do not meet outside of court. Late afternoon, the program director called with a warning. He is practicing calm responses during staff role plays. He uses lawyerly phrases and avoids direct threats. I asked for a written record of every rehearsal. The director paused, then lowered his tone one notch. He told a peer you would break before the review. We logged the quote and added it to the packet. Ambiguity hides intent, but paperwork drags it into light. Evening brought a certified letter slid under my door. Intent to reclaim personal property was scrawled across the top. The list included trophies and a box labeled Legacy. I arranged a police standby for any retrieval attempt. During that standby, his cousin appeared with a flat smile. Here to collect only what's listed, she held a tote. Nothing leaves without inventory and a signature, the officer instructed. She signed and left with less than she expected. My phone buzzed with a filtered recording from the precinct. Locker footage identified your husband through gait analysis software. Detective is filing add-on charges related to stalking. The word stalking burned but also steadied my resolve. I took my bag to a different hotel across town. At the front desk, I requested a room near stairs. I paid with the new card and used a throwaway email. An escort walked me to the elevator without conversation. Midnight dragged me awake with a vibration against my wrist. An alert flagged a login attempt on my cloud backup. I killed syncing and initiated emergency transfer to offline storage. Everything moved while I paced and counted down minutes. Before dawn, the liaison texted a shift in the timeline. Step-down bed delayed, remains on unit until Friday. Team notes improved cooperation mixed with grandiose themes. I filed the line about themes where it would matter. At 9 sharp, we entered another courtroom with fresh filings. The judge scanned the new exhibits with narrowed eyes. My lawyer outlined the devices, messages, and the pattern sheet. The judge raised a hand and asked for the detective. He testified in clipped phrases and kept it clinical. Gate match, purchase records, locker footage, device frequencies. The judge turned to the defense and waited for argument. They whispered quickly and requested a recess they didn't get. Conditions modified, the judge announced into the quiet air. No third-party contact and no proximity within 2 blocks. Electronic monitoring authorized upon release from treatment. I sat very still and felt the room tilt back level. In the corridor, his public defender approached with caution. He wants a restorative chat moderated by clergy. Decline through counsel only, my lawyer answered before I breathed. They retreated down the hall as my pulse steadied. Outside, I called his sister and kept it measured. Monitoring begins after discharge and all contact runs through counsel. She cried once and then switched to logistics. I'll handle the program coordination and transportation. On my way home, a cyclist brushed too close and shouted. Stop ruining a good man with courts, he barked. I turned and saw a familiar face from the group chat. I lifted my phone and watched him disappear into traffic. Back at the apartment, the new alarm chirped on arming. I boiled pasta and ate 2 bites standing up. My body trembled and then settled like a machine cooling. I stared at the door and repeated my anchor line. Near midnight, a final text arrived from an unlisted number. Paper cuts heal when you stop slicing. It blinked twice. I forwarded it to the detective and to my attorney. 3 dots appeared from the detective and then stopped. I slept in bursts and woke before the alarm sounded. The calendar held a line I had chosen days ago. File the long order and finalize the separation packet. I packed the folder and walked out into a watchful morning. The courthouse metal detector beeped and the marshal lifted a hand. Phone in the tray and stepped through again. His tone stayed flat. I complied and kept my breathing even and small. I was here to finish what I started. My lawyer met me by the elevators with a folder. Final order and dissolution on the docket, she murmured quickly. We push for permanence and no contact extended. I nodded because anything else would wobble. In the gallery, I sat forward and fixed on the bench. Across the aisle, he entered with the monitor at his ankle. He scanned the room until his eyes locked on me. I kept my face still and my hands relaxed. The clerk called our case number and the room settled. My attorney rose and outlined the pattern again. Devices, messages, attempts through third parties. A timeline that didn't need adjectives to hurt. His counsel tried a gentler route with polished phrases. Illness and remorse landed on the wood like theater. He lifted his chin and looked almost composed. That almost had teeth behind it. The judge turned to me and asked 2 questions. Are you certain you want dissolution today? Do you request lifetime no contact with carve-outs for counsel? Yes to both, I answered without hunting for softer words. He shifted and leaned toward the microphone with care. I want treatment and reconciliation under supervision. The judge raised a hand and cut him off clean. This is not mediation, this is relief from harm. The detective entered with a printout marked Exhibit J. Locker footage, purchase receipts, transfer of funds to cash. The judge studied the page and then the ankle monitor. You violated boundaries while on release, she stated coolly. A gasp from the back row broke the stale silence. His aunt covered her mouth and stared at the floor. The judge continued without losing cadence or speed. Orders modified to prohibitions without exceptions. My lawyer slid me a pen for the final signature. The paper steadied under my palm like a choice. I pressed the tip and drew each letter careful and slow. My hand stopped shaking on the last stroke. Marriage dissolved as of today, the judge announced. Protective order converted to long-term with enforcement. Guns prohibited, technology restrictions, mandatory treatment compliance. The gavel fell and the air snapped tight. He stood with both fists closed but kept them low. Please let me speak to her once, he tried again. The deputy took 1 step and the request died. I looked away and saved my breath for later. In the corridor, reporters hovered with open recorders. My attorney blocked them with 1 raised palm. No comment during active enforcement, she said briskly. I walked past and kept my eyes on the exit. Outside, the minister from his family church waited near the steps. We can guide a healing conversation, he offered gently. Guidance happens without me present, I replied and paused. He lowered his gaze and let me pass. At the curbs, the advocate waved me toward an unmarked car. Escort home, then installation of the upgraded alarm. Grant access to the technician and keep the wedge ready. I climbed in and let the door thump shut. Halfway to the apartment, my phone buzzed with a ping. A new email arrived from a burner address. Undo the order or the story goes public. I forwarded it to the detective without opening the attachment. The technician reached my door with a toolkit and a clipboard. Panic button, window contacts, duress code, he listed quickly. Test each one before I leave, he added. We ran drills until muscle memory took over. Midway through the test, the intercom rasped my unit. Delivery for you, a voice announced through static. The tech looked at me and tilted his head. Decline and call the lobby, I whispered. Return to sender, I told the concierge over the line. No packages without prior notice, I added firmly. He confirmed and promised to alert security if anyone lingered. I hung up and felt the tremor pass. A knock sounded anyway, slow and deliberate and wrong. I glanced through the peephole and saw a stranger. He held a clipboard and no parcel. Management requested a meter reading, he claimed. Leave a card and schedule through the office, I replied. He hesitated and adjusted his cap on purpose. Policy changed this week, he tried once more. Then show the memo, I countered without turning the lock. Footsteps retreated and a door slammed down the hall. The tech pointed at the camera above the frame. We captured him and the badge already, he said. Send it along with your daily log. When he left, I ate crackers and watched the door. My phone vibrated with a text from his sister. Unit pushed his discharge to Monday, she wrote. He failed a check-in by refusing meds again. Keep records and take care of yourself, I replied. Please stay off my block and do not relay messages. She answered with a single word, understood. Relief arrived small and useful. The precinct rang at 4 with a quick update. Stalking charges moved to prosecution, the detective reported. Tech vendor shared shipping IP and timestamps. Your case has traction and a paper spine. I sat at the table and laid out the remaining forms. Apartment lease transfer, insurance updates, name change decision. Each line required a future where he was not beside me. I checked boxes and drew breath through my teeth. A neighbor tapped my door with 2 knuckles and a whisper. 2 men loitered near the elevator and asked for you. They left when I told them cameras were pointed. I thanked her and messaged the advocate immediately. At dusk, my therapist called for a brief check-in. Notice your body right now, she prompted softly. Feet on the floor, jaw unclenched, shoulders down. The instructions worked like a manual for staying. Say your commitment out loud once, she added. I end abuse and accept grief without bargaining. My voice surprised me with how clear it sounded. Silence followed and felt like approval. The program director emailed a structured update next. Compliance waivers, insight shallow, cooperation transactional. Team recommends continued treatment with external monitoring. I forwarded it to my lawyer and flagged it urgent. At 9, the officer from earlier called again. We arrested the scooter courier for intimidation near your office. He carried a note requesting a park meeting tomorrow. Stay with your escort and alter your commute. I opened my calendar and built a new route. Different train, different exit, different coffee stand. I sent the plan to 3 trusted numbers. Predictability had been a luxury I could not afford. Near midnight, a final message from his number appeared. Last chance for mercy, the text blinked once. Then a photo of our wedding day filled the screen. I closed the app and pressed the power button hard. Morning came with a knock from the process server. Certified copies for your records, she announced politely. Final decree and the long-term protection. She smiled once and stepped back from the threshold. I carried the envelope to the table and sat. I slid the decree out and read the first line twice. It was simple and unromantic and exactly right. My hand stopped shaking for the first time in weeks. The intercom buzzed again and the concierge sounded relieved. Police at the desk with an update for you. I went downstairs and met the detective by the elevators. Locker footage linked to additional purchases in his name. More devices, I asked, ready for the worst. 3 more, all intercepted at the facility with staff help. The judge will hear this if violations continue. He handed me a copy of the new report. Back upstairs, I packed a small backpack for the day. Wallet, keys, order, log. I texted my anchor contact and opened the door. Every hinge felt like a choice made on purpose. Outside, a car rolled past with windows cracked. A familiar hoodie angled away from the camera on the corner. Patrol turned the block and tucked in behind quietly. I kept walking and did not speed up. At work, security issued a temporary badge without waiting. They logged my new code phrase and a list of allowed callers. I set my phone to record any unknown number instantly. Today would be boring and safe, or it would not be today. Late afternoon, the judge's clerk called my attorney directly. Additional violations filed under the same docket, came the note. Review scheduled with potential remand to custody. I exhaled and felt something inside uncoil. As sunset approached, I returned to the apartment with groceries. I scanned the hall and keyed the entry fast. The alarm chirped once and settled into its hum. My shoulders dropped and I set the bag down. A final voicemail waited from his counselor at the program. Client transferred to a higher security wing after curfew breach. Monitoring continues and staff documented your boundaries. Please maintain no contact while treatment proceeds. I stood in the kitchen and let that sit. Divorce was ink now and order was law. His recovery, if it happened, would not require my jeopardy. I chose distance and lived with the echo. I ate dinner and washed the plate and dried my hands. The alarm reported armed and the wedge slid into place. I lay down and stared at the dark until it softened. Some losses protect you and you keep them anyway.